You're in the CNN newsroom. Thank you for being here. I'm Ana Cabrera in New York, and we begin with a stunning show of defiance from the NFL against President Trump in cities all across the country. At every single kickoff today, players, coaches, and even team owners are kneeling or locking arms in solidarity after President Trump called for the NFL to fire any player who refuses to stand during the national anthem. Now, this is the Falcons-Lions game here. Owners of both teams took the field. They locked arms with their players. And the singer who performed the national anthem also took a knee and raised his fist in the air.
Land of the free and the home of the brave.
In Nashville moments ago at the Titans-Seahawks game, both teams stayed in the locker room while the anthem played. The anthem singer at this game also taking a knee. And earlier in Chicago, the Steelers stayed in their locker room during the anthem as well. Only one player, Army veteran Alejandro Villanueva, stood alone on the edge of the field with his hand over his heart. President Trump is officially responding to these protests, but it's unclear if he supports them or possibly misunderstands them. I'll let you decide. Here's his tweet. Great solidarity for the national anthem and for our country. Standing with locked arms is good. Kneeling is not acceptable. Bad ratings. Now, if you're asking how we got here, to the NFL publicly protesting the president and the president publicly demanding that NFL players be fired, well, it all started on Friday when President Trump went on a tear during a rally in Alabama. Here's a reminder of what he said, and we want to warn you, you may find this language offensive.
Wouldn't you love to see one of these NFL owners, when somebody disrespects our flag, to say, get that son of a bitch off the field right now, out, he's fired. He's fired!
So with one more NFL game kicking off this evening, the league is planning to air a message of unity during tonight's game, a 1-minute ad that was produced for the Super Bowl earlier this year. Meanwhile, more than 24 NFL franchises have spoken out in support of players and Commissioner Roger Goodell. CNN sports correspondent Andy Scholes is joining us now. And Andy, what have we seen on the field today? Give us a larger sense.
Well, Anna, you know, every NFL team on Saturday nights have team meetings before they're, getting set to go get on the field on Sunday. And it's clear that in all of these meetings, the players and coaches discussed President Trump's comments and what they were going to do about him. And as we saw across the NFL, each team had a plan, whether that plan was to lock arms together or some players, if they wanted to kneel, or if some players wanted to sit, it was up to them. And as you can see in that Titans-Seahawks game, both teams deciding to remain in the locker room during the national anthem. The same thing was done by the Pittsburgh Steelers earlier in the day. None of them came out on the field with the exception of one player, and their head coach, Mike Tomlin, he explained the decision of why they remained in the locker room for the national anthem. Let's take a listen.
We're not participating in the anthem today. Not to be disrespectful to the anthem, to remove ourselves from this circumstance. People shouldn't have to choose. If a guy wants to go about his normal business and participate in the anthem, he shouldn't be forced to choose sides. If a guy feels a need to do something, he shouldn't be separated from his teammate who chooses not to. So we're not participating today. That's our decision. We're going to be 100%. We came here to play a football game. That's our intentions, and we're going to play to win.
To be clear, that means your team won't be on the field.
We will not be on the field.
Now, there was one exception on the Pittsburgh Steelers. Alejandro Villanueva did come out into the tunnel for the national anthem, and he is a former Army Ranger, did 3 tours in Afghanistan, graduated from West Point, so clearly coming out for the national anthem is something that is very important to him and something that he decided to do, even though the rest of his teammates decided to remain in the locker room. And Anna, something we did see that we had not seen before in terms of demonstrations and showing signs of unity before during the national anthem was owners participating in that with the players, and that is something we definitely saw today. You see there Shahid Khan of the Jaguars in London earlier this morning, and then you see Arthur Blank arm in arm with his star Julio Jones, Martha Ford with her head coach Jim Caldwell, Stephen Ross of the Dolphins, Jeffrey Lurie with the Philadelphia Eagles. Owners were down there with their players showing a sign of unity, Anna, and that is something we had not seen when it comes to these signs of unity during the national anthem before today.
Also noteworthy that some of those owners, like Shahid Khan, donated to President Trump. In fact, $1 million was his donation for his inaugural committee, and yet he's down there on the field showing that solidarity. Andy, is there anyone that we're hearing from the NFL defending the president?
In terms of today, Anna, I saw no signs of anyone defending anything that President Trump said. It seems that everyone is in agreement that they wanted to show a sign of solidarity. And, the NFL, those players consider themselves brothers. And when the president says that one of their brothers should be fired, those guys, they showed us today that they're going to stick together.
Andy Scholes, thanks for that. I want to bring in CNN national correspondent Ryan Young, live outside Soldier Field in Chicago now, where the Bears played the Pittsburgh Steelers today. And Ryan, the big talker, of course, was that all of the Steelers, except for one player who had served in the Army, chose to stay in the locker room for the national anthem. What was the reaction from fans?
Yeah, what an interesting conversation. I really thought when we arrived here, a lot more people would be informed about why the Steelers were doing this. What we kind of learned from talking to people is there were some people who weren't even aware of the reasons why they were even protesting or deciding to stay on the inside, or why Donald Trump decided to aim some of his focus toward these players. In fact, by each person that we talked to, one after another, they were sort of surprised that it's gotten this big. And we were even kind of discussing with people what they would like to see moving forward. Now, you do talk about Soldier Field. This is a place that honors soldiers. So then you had that kind of back and forth with people in terms of maybe this wasn't the place to do it. And according to a couple of fans, some of the players were booed as they came outside. In fact, listen to some of the fans and what they had to say about what happened here today.
It's a show of disrespect, not only for those that have fought and died for our country, but those are currently serving, and I disagree with it.
I think that the message you're sending is, as a unit, you're a team. You are a team player that's very awesome, but at the same time, you're facing a nation. Like, it's nation versus team in that point.
I think personally that they should stand up for the national anthem. That's just my personal opinion. I do respect the players' rights to take the knee. However, Soldier Field has history, and when they didn't come out, I was surprised.
I think it was just disrespectful, and now it's made into a bigger issue than it really was. It went from one person now to a whole team, and any type of funding or whatever that's happening with the government should be pulled away from the NFL.
To me, one, had a brother, lost his life in the war, and to see somebody not be respectful to do that, I always have been a firm believer there's two sides to every story, but not to know their side of the story is killing me because of the fact it seemed disrespectful. So I'm going to have to get their side of the story to make my unbiased opinion, but I will say this. For the sake of God, we're in Soldier Field. If you're going to stand for the flag and for the national anthem, this is where you do it at.
So just looking at my social media, I was surprised by some of the answers because of the fact that they were saying that they weren't informed about why this would happen here and today. And then you had other people who did not want to be on camera. They said they came here to enjoy the game. They didn't want to talk politics, and they hated the fact that people were using the time or even the presidency to kind of weigh in on what was going on in sports. So there's that split in terms of what's going on here. Of course, a bigger conversation will be happening across the sports world. Some people said they're fed up with it. One thing to remember, up until 2009, a lot of times NFL teams stayed in the locker room for the anthem. This only became a recent part of NFL history with teams coming out for that national anthem. Some people were saying they would like to see it kind of go away altogether. Some others are saying it's time to stand. So, look, people are split on this one. Anna?
But very quickly, Ryan, did anybody actually leave? As, again, the president had suggested that would be another way of affecting change and preventing these athletes from taking a kneel.
I didn't see anyone leave. I mean, look, these tickets are really expensive, and the folks that we talked to were on the outside were trying to get in. Their whole idea was they'd like to see them stand. But I have to give some folks credit. They wanted to learn more about the issues for why this was going on.
All right, Ryan Young there in Chicago for us. Thank you. And as we mentioned briefly, two NFL teams, all the players and the staff unified for a dramatic pregame protest. I'm talking about the Seattle Seahawks and the Tennessee Titans. Their game began just in the last hour. And take a look at what happened when the national anthem began. Not a single Titan or Seahawk in sight. Every player on two NFL teams choosing to stay in their respective locker rooms. And I want to read this from the Seattle players, the Seahawks. Quote, "We will not stand for the injustice that has plagued people of color in this country. Out of love for our country and in honor of the sacrifices made on our behalf, we unite to oppose those that would deny our most basic freedoms. We remain committed in continuing to work towards equality and justice for all. Let's talk more about this with Tara Setmayer, a lifelong NFL Giants fan and ABC News political contributor, hence the Giants colors, Jeff Balaban, member of Donald J. Trump for President Advisory Board, and Dave Zirin, sports editor for The Nation, co-author of an upcoming book with Seattle Seahawk Michael Bennett about the NFL and racism. So before today, Bennett sat down for the national anthem in every game this season. Dave, I'll start with you, writing a book with the outspoken Bennett. What have you learned? What is the message?
I mean, I've learned that the NFL is a brotherhood, and Donald Trump, who never played football, doesn't understand that. And I think that's why he really stepped in this particular issue. The NFL is such a brotherhood that even though many players do not necessarily stand or kneel with Michael Bennett or Colin Kaepernick on questions of racism or police brutality, they do believe that the President of the United States should not use the greatest bully pulpit in the world to call for people to get fired. And they also disagree that any player, including Michael Bennett, should ever be referred to as a quote-unquote son of a bitch. Now, Michael Bennett's mother, Penny Bennett, whom I know is a teacher for over 20 years and a beautiful person. And if you look at Michael Bennett's response to Donald Trump's speech, it was very short. All he said is, "My mother is a wonderful person. She is not a bitch." And this is what I think we need to really hold on to here.
Let's be careful with the language here. Please.
I'm trying to be careful with language, but I'm so deeply offended knowing Penny Bennett and knowing how upset these players are about what they were called. And people have to understand, and Trump needs to understand, that you can't do that. And NFL players, they have a solidarity with one another that will not allow such a thing to go unchallenged.
And yet, Dave, we heard from the fans there that they didn't really understand the message from these players that are taking a knee during the national anthem.
I just got to say, yeah, and with all deep respect to the reporter on the scene, he was asking Chicago fans about the Pittsburgh Steelers. I mean, honestly, that's just not exactly where you're getting. It's like going to an Army game and asking them about Navy. I mean, you're just not going to get the most unbiased thoughts on what players are doing from that perspective. And of course, fans are going to be divided. But I was very struck today, watching all these games, surveying it top to bottom, that even though some of the booing has been reported, there really wasn't that much. I mean, all in all, when you think about where we are in this country, it's like, yes, we're divided, but Trump is on an island with about 35% of the country. And I think most folks are just absolutely shocked that the President of the United States would use this kind of coarse language and would go after people who work for private corporations and say that they should lose their jobs for expressing their First Amendment rights in a ritual that's only been around, as you said, since 2009.
Jeff, is President Trump on an island here, as Dave suggested?
It's a big, giant island. It kind of looks like a continent, actually. I mean, you saw exactly what the report was. First of all, the reports were that there was massive booing, much more than is typical in an NFL game. And second of all, your reporter couldn't find a single fan who didn't agree with the president in this case. This is a case of talking heads in media sort of completely missing the boat here, and Donald Trump understanding where the sentiments of the nation really are.
Well, Ryan Young did say that people were divided. He didn't say everybody
that, but he couldn't
agreed,
find anybody. Everyone he had on air seemed to say they supported the president's position.
Do you think the president, though, miscalculated the backlash?
I don't think so at all. I think the president...
When you see these protests and the NFL owners, some of whom are outspoken Donald Trump fans, uniting against the president's comments.
I think that the president exactly knows where the heart of the country is on this issue. I think this is an issue that really unites people much more than it divides people. The flag, the anthem, it unites people. People are trying to make it about all kinds of things it's not. The reality is that the NFL is very hypocritical when it comes to what it allows players to comment about or opine about publicly. Somehow, the flag and the anthem they've gotten away with. The president called it out. Americans, by and large, agree with him. You saw it with the fans. They really agree with him.
Sarah?
This is the circuitous logic that we get into all the time when Donald Trump makes these really classless, divisive, disgraceful comments as President of the United States. Citizen Donald Trump made a career of making a spectacle of himself, and people watch him for that. Now that he's President of the United States, there are real-life consequences to the things that he says and does. As much as I, as the granddaughter of a World War II veteran, as the wife of a federal law enforcement officer who serves at the pleasure of this president and the flag, but the office of the presidency, I'm very proud of this flag. I'm proud of this country. I don't agree with kneeling as a protest, but I fully support their right to do it. And the President of the United States coming out and framing it this way has taken away the merits of any of the arguments on both sides. We can have a discussion about whether it's that flag that represents the people who sacrificed for this country to give these oftentimes poor young black men that have talent the opportunity to become part of the 1% in this country. God bless America for that opportunity for them. But then we can talk about why they're protesting. That has merit. But none of that happens now because the President of the United States is engaged in tribal politics. No, he is not. He is on an island. He's not representing the majority of the American people in the way that he came out with that classless, crass language, calling women what he, that. But then again, we're not surprised. We know what he said about grabbing women by the genitals, so no one's surprised about that language. That's who he is. This is his character.
You're talking about the use of the phrase SOB?
I'm talking about
let's not pretend that SOB is about a woman or about the mother. It's a nasty word for people.
He is the President of the United States. You should have respect for the office, okay? And that is not respectful of the office. It's beneath the office of the presidency, and it's disgraceful.
Dave, the president just this afternoon said this has nothing to do with race. Your response to that?
Donald Trump's last 40 years have had everything to do with race. And whether you're talking about the housing discrimination cases in the 1970s, his treatment of the Central Park Five in the 1980s, his behavior on the set of The Apprentice, the people who he surrounded himself with in the White House. I mean, the list goes on and on. But I would really put a point on the issue of who Donald Trump always chooses to use his bully pulpit to attack. It's almost used exclusively for people of color and women, because and I think in this particular case, he thought to himself in his lizard brain, hey, wait a minute, I'm going to go after rich young black men who are dissenting against racism. I'm in front of this Alabama crowd. What could go wrong? What he did not expect is that these young black men are part of a brotherhood that includes the billionaire owners who backed his campaign. It includes coaches, and it includes a hell of a lot of fans. I'm sorry, but interviewing 4 Chicago fans who are going to a Steelers game and hearing their comments expressing ambivalence and then saying Trump is on a continent, everybody supports him, is absurd. It's living in a bubble.
As though he doesn't know what he's talking about.
It's a
bubble.
But don't pretend he doesn't know that he doesn't, like all the rest of his business. He's a billionaire. Yeah, he literally owned a professional football team. Don't pretend he doesn't know it.
Yeah, he ran a football team into the ground.
But this is
you want to debate the USFL
and what happened with
Donald Trump?
Whatever the president does, you put it to a Rorschach test of race. This is not a racial comment. You want to turn it into a racial comment. It's a comment about respect for the national anthem, respect for the flag. By the way, respect for NFL. But you're turning it to racial. It's not a racial issue.
But
he did say that.
Hold on, guys. So I think it's important because you are expressing what we are hearing from one side of this issue. Certainly, there are a lot of people who agree with you, Jeff, but there are others like Martellus Bennett who tweeted the idea of real Donald Trump. This is a tweet, thinking that suggesting firing me from football confirms that he thinks that it's all that I can do as a black man. People are interpreting this
I don't even understand that.
as
Does that tweet make sense to you?
Racist issue.
No, people are projecting it because it helps them to project this as a racist issue. Does that tweet even make sense? Why does it say it's the only thing you can do?
Why doesn't it make sense?
Because what that tweet says is that it somehow suggests that being fired for using the platform, and it is a giant platform of the NFL pregame during the national anthem where the camera's panning them, to use that platform to show disrespect for the flag and for the anthem and saying, go find another kind of job where you're not in the public eye disrespecting it, that doesn't mean you can't get other work. It doesn't even remotely relate to that. I mean, it's unbelievably contorted logic. So that's exactly the point. You try to find contorted logic to suggest that there's racial motivation or animus behind it. But there is no racial animus behind it. It's a simple question of respect for the flag, the anthem, and the NFL.
But these people are saying their voices aren't being heard. They're saying, you don't understand what it's like to walk in the shoes of somebody who is African American.
I don't. I know it's like to walk in my shoes, but I don't understand how that tweet saying, you don't understand what it was like to, well, no, he didn't say that at all. He said that the president suggested that I couldn't get another job outside of professional sports. But the president said nothing of the sort. The president said that he thinks that people agree that they'd like to see these people fired who get up there and use the platform they have to denigrate the United States of America, to denigrate the anthem and the flag.
Here's the bottom line. The bottom line is the president shouldn't be weighing in this capacity at all.
Thank you.
If he should, there's
God.
another way. I mean, there's a lot. I mean, there's people suffering in Puerto Rico, Americans suffering in the Florida Keys. I mean, there's North Korea and Iran are testing missiles.
Thank you.
There are other things the President of the United States should be focusing on. And I'll tell you what, you know, I actually shed a tear today watching the opening national anthem ceremony of the Giants-Eagles game, and shed a tear after they lost. But it was emotional for me because I look at it as someone who's an American, lifelong football fan, and there's many Americans out there who want to go and enjoy the game. And the idea of saluting our flag and respecting our men and women in uniform and being able to go and enjoy that and what used to be national unity around our flag. Like, I think of post 9/11 and how proud everyone was. You know, I look at that one player that came out who went to West Point, was in the military. You know, good for him. We should never be ashamed of our patriotism. So now we've created this environment where it's so us versus them that we can't even enjoy a football game on Sunday and proudly stand up for the American flag and what this country represents, flaws and all, because Donald Trump has decided to weigh into this like some citizen on the street at a bar, disrespecting the office of the presidency and further dividing this country.
I don't know this delusion of what this country ever was, because honestly, I remember 9/11 also, and I remember was that literally one day after 9/11, on September 12th, a school in California was sued because they had on their marquee, "God bless America." They said that's religious speech. The reality is that you know, politicians come around the issue when it's convenient for them for a minute.
What does that have to do with solidarity around the flag? I remember for months that everyone had flags in their cars, in their windows, in their front lawns. Come on.
Some people did, and other people criticized it. The point is, there's always been people criticizing it.
And that flag represents their freedom to do that.
And you know, that's right. That's great.
And the freedom for those players to kneel if they want to, as wrong as we may think they are. And the president seems to think that that doesn't apply.
And the president is saying that it's wrong.
No.
The president thinks that's wrong.
No,
Dave,
the president,
go ahead.
No,
Last
the
word.
president did not say it was wrong. He said they should be fired from their jobs. That is wrong. The idea of using the bully pulpit to try to deny someone employment from a private company, if that happened in another country, we'd be calling for some sort of economic or military intervention.
It
the
happens
idea
in this
that you
country all the
excuse
time.
That, don't interrupt me, sir.
All the time. People express dissent to the liberal mentality about race relations or about gender relations, and they lose their jobs in public. It happens all the time.
Great cable news interrupting. Nicely done. What you do not understand is that what Donald Trump did was wrong, and to defend it puts you on the wrong side of history, and you, sir, are defending the indefensible.
We disagree. I didn't say anything. I'm wrong. I think you're wrong.
Well, he defended Charlottesville,
well,
too,
guys,
so
I appreciate everybody coming on, having this discussion. It's an important one, and we'll have you all back to continue another time. Dave Zirin, Tara Setmire, and Jeff Balaban, thank you all. Coming up, a gunman opened fire. Coming up in just a moment, straight ahead, he's firing back at football players, coaches, and owners after that unprecedented show of defiance across the NFL. Today, we will have the latest in the escalating controversy. Right now, let's watch.
Something about it. There was great solidarity. I watched a little bit. I was not watching the games today, believe me, I'm doing other things. But I watched a little bit, and I will say that there was tremendous solidarity for our flag and for our country.
President, your friend, Robert Kraft, said he was disappointed by what you said on Friday.
Well, that's okay. Look, he's got to take his... He has to take his ideas and go with what he wants. I think it's very disrespectful to our country. I think it's very, very disrespectful to our flag. I like Bob very much. He's my friend, but he gave me a Super Bowl ring a month ago, right? So he's a good friend of mine. But and I want him to do what he wants to do. But we have a great country. We have great people representing our country, especially our soldiers, our first responders, and they should be treated with respect. And when you get on your knee and you don't respect the American flag or the anthem, that's not being treated with respect.
Are you claiming racial tensions,
No, this has nothing to do with race. I've never said anything about race. This has nothing to do with race or anything else. This has to do with respect for our country and respect for our flag.
Has the Big Six finalized its tax plan yet? Do you know what the Big Six...
we have a tax plan that's totally finalized. I think it'll be terrific. I think it's going to go through, and it'll be the largest tax cut in the history of our country.
Congressman Rohrabacher to discuss a possible pardon for Julian Assange?
I've never heard that mentioned. Really, I've never heard that mentioned.
Will the corporate rate be 20%?
I hope the corporate rate's going to be 15%, but we'll see.
The Big Six want it to be 15%.
In the plan, we'll see what happens, but I hope it's going to be 15%, but it's going to be substantially lower, so we bring jobs back into our country.
Do the Big Six want the individual rate to be 35%?
No, we think we're going to bring the individual rate to 10% or 12%, much lower than it is right now. This is a plan for the middle class and for companies so they can bring back jobs.
What about the chance to get the health care plan through the Senate?
Well, we're looking at the health care. I mean, I've been watching for 7 years as the Republicans have been saying repeal and replace. Then you have John McCain voting no for whatever reason. And by the way, Arizona is one of the biggest beneficiaries. Even the governor, Ducey, is totally in favor of it. It's also great for Maine. It's also great for Alaska. Every state you're talking about, it happens to be particularly good for. So I don't know what they're doing, but you know what? Eventually we'll win, whether it's now or later.
Are you going to work with Democrats on a
We'll see what happens. But the Republicans have been saying for 7 years, repeal and replace, and now they have a chance. And the funny thing is, in Arizona, it's up 116%. In Maine, it's way up. In Maine, if you look at what's going on with Maine, they get a tremendous amount of money with the grants. I mean, if you look at the Maine with the block grants, you look at Alaska, one of the biggest beneficiaries would be Alaska, and these are the people that are against it. Eventually, we will win on that. My primary focus, I must tell you, and has been from the beginning, as you can imagine, is taxes. I believe we will be successful in the largest tax cut in our country's history. Thank you all very much. I'll see you later.
Again, those comments just moments ago from the president. And of course, he hit on a number of different issues, from taxes, promising the largest tax cut in American history. He was also asked about the health care plan, saying we will eventually win, whether it's now or later. And he was asked about this developing controversy regarding his comments that NFL players who kneel during the national anthem should be fired. I want to bring in CNN's Boris Sanchez, standing by in Washington for us. Boris, the president on that last issue, the NFL and the national anthem protests, he is not backing down. Instead, he is digging in.
Yeah, absolutely, Anna. I should tell you the president has just returned here to the White House after several days in Bedminster. He has a busy week ahead, not only on the legislative front with Senate Republicans trying to push for this latest effort to repeal and replace Obamacare before the week is over, but also this tax reform rollout that you heard him discuss there. It really draws into question why the president is choosing to focus on this issue of NFL players taking a knee during the national anthem. It's something that he first brought up during that rally in Alabama on Friday, and he reiterated it this morning on Twitter, telling NFL fans that they should boycott the league in order to force owners to do something to make these players stand during the national anthem. You heard it during that gaggle with reporters before leaving Bedminster, saying that he really thinks that the owners should do something about this. One of the curious things about that session with reporters is when he was asked about whether or not his comments inflame race relations, and he said this has nothing to do with race. Of course, if you go back over a year, back to August of last year when Colin Kaepernick first started kneeling during the national anthem, his reasoning was that he was protesting against the way that he feels police officers treat people of color. So you have all of these players doing this in part to protest race relations, and the president saying that this has nothing to do with race. To highlight that, he did tweet out earlier today, writing in part, quote, "Courageous patriots have fought and died for our American flag. We must honor and respect it." He also retweeted someone who wrote that if you boycott the flag, we will boycott you. Again, calling for a boycott of the NFL. We've heard numerous players, both in the NFL and NBA, coaches, league officials, and owners saying that they're disappointed in the president's comments, including a friend of Donald Trump's, Patriots owner Robert Kraft, who said that politicians could learn something from the teamwork that players display on the field every week. You heard the president during the gaggle saying that Robert Kraft is still a friend, that he has to do what he has to do. There are still more NFL games on the slate later today. We may see more statements made on the field, and perhaps the president responding to them, as he usually does on Twitter. Anna.
All right, Boris Sanchez at the White House. Thank you. Coming up, former Green Bay Packers player Eric Matthews is going to join us with his reaction to this developing feud between the president and the league. Stay with us in the CNN Newsroom. President Trump's gripe with the NFL igniting coast-to-coast conversations about patriotism, race, and power. How do these three topics intersect with one of America's favorite pastimes, football? I want to get perspective from a former NFL player, Eric Matthews, who helped the Green Bay Packers win the Super Bowl in 1997. Eric, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
When President Trump called for players who kneeled to be fired, what was your first reaction?
My first reaction was more of how he said it. And that, to me, that was more disrespectful than anything to you call somebody out, sons, whatever. That was really like, you are really doing this on national TV where we have kids who actually watch, and our president is talking like this to players that kids look up to. And to me, that was a slap in the face for our president, the highest level of government, to come on TV and talk to people, American citizens, this way. So that right there, to me, was like a slap in the face for our president to do something like that.
And as an African-American man, seeing that these protests are primarily by African-American members of the National Football League, did you take it personally? I did, because I want to see, it took so long for us to come together and, what Kaepernick was in. People don't realize this does nothing to do with the NFL. Kaepernick took a knee for what was going on in our communities, the injustice with the police and the brutality and everything. And I think a lot of people lost perspective of what's going on. It's now become an NFL thing where this whole thing started where it was something that was going on in our community with the police, the brutality on black males. And now it's taken another leg with the presidents coming on, talking about these, using foul language against American citizens again, or what they're taking beliefs for, and these guys are doing what they believe in. And as Americans, exercising their First Amendment right.
Yes. So as a president to say, hey, he's pretty much telling us we don't have that right. And to me, that's like I said, a slap in the face. You don't have that right. So.
What are you hearing from current NFL players?
We talk on a regular basis. We have one of the largest NFL chapters here in the country, and what's so crazy, I was just over a few minutes ago, I was just talking to our president, Bobby Howard, and we had a discussion about what's going on. Everybody's feeling the same way how our president he's coming after us, and we have more stuff in right now that's going on with Korea, these taxes. It's so much other stuff, even with the hurricane survivors. We got so much going on, but you want to weigh in on NFL players, standing for something that they believe in, but we have something that's more, needed from our president, and he's taking this time out to just badmouth Americans.
Eric Matthews, thank you for sharing your thoughts. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
We'll be right back.